And welcome back, guys. So in this particular session, we are still continuing the discussion on SBL exam specimen. So what we've been given is that to a so what we need to find out is that in the October board report, the executive directors refer to number of factors affecting DCS company and the need to choose one of the two alternative strategy options. You now need to do the following. Required draft a section of the report to identify and briefly discuss three main risks which DCS company currently faces and plot them on a heat map, recommending appropriate strategies to manage those risks using an appropriate risk management framework. Professional skill marks are available for demonstrating commercial acumen in identifying and locating the risks approximately, right? And then in number B, we are required to review the spreadsheet prepared by your colleague Freddie Lithium, which evaluates the strategic choices facing DCS company in this 3 years to ensure its validity in supporting your recommendation in the consultancy report. Critically evaluate the contents of spreadsheet, including any assumptions made by DCS company board, to prepare key recommendation for the consultancy report using appropriate supporting evidence to advise which of the two strategies, refocus or realign, DCS company should implement. Right, so let's move on to A first of all. So the potential risks which the company could face whether or not it realigns the business are as follows, right? Candidates only need to discuss any three of these to gain maximum marks. Strategic risks, business risks, financial risks, environmental risks, right? Note markers can give additional credit for any reasonable risks identified in the heat case information and give a professional mark for a reasonable positioning of the risks in the heat map, right? The probability of strategic risks is very high, impact is also very high. So financial risks is probability is a bit low, but impact is quite there. So strategic risks. The key risks which DCS faces is the increased competition in data communication components manufacturing market, the reduced margin and the potential decline in future. At the same time, DCS faces the risks of missing an opportunity to use its competencies to develop the potentially more profitable area of the business. DCS currently faces lower market share and declining shareholders value, and this is projected to be 10% decline year on year for the next 3 years. To reduce or avoid these risks, DCS could realign its business towards more profitable domestic market by investing in the network support business in terms of increased R&D. To reduce or avoid these risks, could realign its business towards more profitable domestic market by investing in network support business in terms of increased R&D, fixed asset investment, and improvements in policies regarding to staff retention and recruitment to support the potential growth area. This would also reduce its general cost base, right? So what is the business risk? So as already explained in the 5 forces analysis, apart from heavy dependence on its main business sector of data communications, 65% of its turnover, DCS is facing economic risks from overdependence on key customer. One of the OEM customer accounts for 40% of the sales. DCS is also over-reliant for its supplies of data communication subcomponents on two MNCs, from which it currently faces serious supply shortages. It also risks further losses of staff and greater recruitment difficulties caused by poor staff morale and due to unattractive location of the DCS headquarters. Under the TARA framework, it is advisable to reduce this risk by widening the supplier and customer base. From the supply perspective, the benefits of this strategy would be spread the risks of disruption to supplies from one or both of the two current suppliers The strategy would also help TCS in terms of bargaining power, particularly it is not getting favorable terms from them. Similarly, widening the customer base or concentrating on high value strategy will reduce its dependence on data communications business and also the bargaining power of their main OEM customers and help their probability. DCS can reduce the staff retention and recruitment risks by adopting tactics and implementing policies to improve the culture of the organization and morale of key staff, right? This could be achieved through offering greater empowerment and devolving more authority to middle managers, an improvement in intrinsic rewards and in pay and conditions, or allowing staff to relocate or work from other geographical locations, which are more attractive to them, may also mitigate these risks. So, in case of financial risks, the main risk is devaluing currency in the main market into which TCS sells a significant proportion of its data communication components. A weakening currency in the economic commodity from which customers settle their payments means that TCS is facing a currency translation exposure, as monies received in devaluing currency will effectively reduce the turnover collected from customers in this market. Under the TARA framework, the risks could be reduced by or transferred by using foreign currency hedging instrument or by taking out loan in denomination of the weak foreign currency, using the payment from the continental customers to offset the liability. The other main financial risk is high level of gearing and risks of breaking bank governance and of default. This could be mitigated by converting some of the debt into equity and by repaying or redeeming loans from DCS considerable cash reserves or by issuing more shares, right? Environmental risks. DCS is not itself at risk of potential environmental impact, but is facing of creating an increased carbon footprint or environmental impact which is not effectively managed and which may itself create environmental costs and incur carbon tax liability. Risks could be transferred through carbon offset strategies, avoided by ceasing to manufacture or distribute goods in a way that creates such as significant carbon footprint or reduce through pursuing tactics or strategies to avoid waste and reduce emissions. So second part of the question was we need to evaluate the contents of the spreadsheet, right? So our spreadsheet. This is our spreadsheet. So table 1 of exhibit 4 makes a number of assumptions. These are as follows. Okay, table 1. What is table 1? So the do nothing strategy is not considered as an option by board. Not considered an option by the board, and a reasonable quick financial analysis would confirm that this is not viable option, but the confirmation has not been included in October board report or in Freddie's lithium spreadsheet. Therefore, a financial evaluation of the do nothing option against the two options would give a more complete picture. In fact, do nothing option is not considered, right? That's also another important point. And then A financial evaluation of the do nothing option against the other two options would give more complete picture. In fact, are there any other strategies available to DCS? These do not seem to have been considered by the board. It is reasonable to extrapolate a recent decline of 10% revenue is indicative of future trends in cash contributions by segment. There seems to be no explanations of how the relative cash contributions of each significant in 2015 was arrived at. Right? No explanations. And other than being calculated after interest and taxes. That's the case, and then after that, the definition of cash contribution also needs to be investigated further to verify whether it is calculated before capital expenditure or is a free cash flow, because the forecast might differ depending on this cash flow is on how this cash flow is defined, right? So it is possible to assume that annual addition fixed cost would be consistent in each year of the forecasting planning period. As stated, in reality, there could be greater fixed cost expenditure in the first of the new strategy and less in the subsequent years. Is it reasonable to assume that fixed cost savings in the data communications plant would be same regardless of which growth forecast emerges? This seems unreasonable, as potential savings in the division would probably depend to some extent on the level of growth which materializes from strategy 2 if implemented. The calculation within the spreadsheet are all seem accurate, but time value for the money which has been taken into account. If the cash flow after tax and interest and tax were discounted, they would need to be discounted by the gearing cost of capital, which is estimated at 12%. Making this adjustment to the cash flow will yield a net present value for the project and will change the payback estimate. This is shown below. Minus 0.9. It's just constant, right? Plus 3, right? Total gas contribution is this, and then incremental cash flow is 4 minus 1. In comparison with this, with strategy 1, right? Incremental cash flow is there, and then after that, so annual fixed cost based on expected growth, right? This cash fixed cost savings, net cash fixed cost, right? This minus this, okay, and then incremental cash contribution from thingy. Strategy 2 is this: incremental cash fixed cost. Is this okay? So again, in a incremental net cash contribution from strategy 2 compared with strategy 1, right? So what has it done basically? Minus 0.2 times 1 divided by 1.12 to the power square. Right, okay. And after that, this thing also has been discounted, right? So this will give us a negative present value of 0.011. So this means strategy 2 realignment has a negative net present value of 11,000, which means it does not pay back in 3 years planning horizon. So it was 2.11 month, but since not discounted, so it will only pay back in more than 3 years. Sorry. So once that's all is done, then recommendations to DCS board, right? So what are the recommendation? The purely financial evaluation in B above shows DCS should not realign towards the higher value, more differentiated network support segment, although on discounted payback would indicate that it just repays for itself within 3 years. However, the strategic and broader business benefits to be gained from realigning in this way are that it will help DCS become a differentiator, concentrating on higher value, low volume business rather than continuing to maintain a increasing challenging cost focus. This might be preferable to remain as active in the high volume, low margin data communication manufacturing business. Preferable to remaining as active in high volume, low margin data communication management business, particularly as the company is so reliant on two key suppliers where supplies are being disrupted and 30% of the OEM customers are representing an increasing risk to higher currency translation cost. From the performance data in the integrated report, it seems that the manufacturing cost is one of the key problems for TCS. Also, the business benefits will include the ability to transfer resources from manufacturing to support site and the potential to make labor cost savings in the manufacturing area, which is more labor intensive and where labor and employment costs in paid in are high. TCS also reduces its carbon footprint further and reduces its environmental impact. The IT benefits of TCS will be it will develop greater capability in the new emerging technologies of cloud computing and big data processing, which will make it a competitive advantage in data electronics market. The strategy to realign the business will make a small negative net present value of minus 11,000 over the 3 years, which on the face it would not justify the strategy on financial grounds alone, assuming that the forecasts are valid. However, while TCS said directors were unable or unwilling to consider the cash flows beyond a 3 year planning period due to subjectivity and prudence, it is reasonable to assume that there would be additional positive net cash flow benefits occurring to DCS well beyond the planning horizon. This seems to be rising exponentially from the trend observed. It could be assumed, particularly in such a competitive and innovative sector as data communication, that the ability of TCS to maintain its current market share and overall turnover of the company could be questioned should no investment of realignment of the business take place. Therefore, considering both strategic and wider business reasons, DCS would be advised to implement the realignment of the business and focus on expanding the network support side of the business and invest in necessary fixed costs, staff recruitment, working capital required by using internally generated funds or issuing more shares, right? Because it cannot ask for any more further lending. Okay, so that's one part. And then what does our third question say? Working notes with the visual aids which will form part of your presentation of overall consultancy report. Using appropriate stakeholder analysis, evaluate how the relative power and interest of the following three stakeholders and the strategies for engaging them should have been changed after TCS company became a public limited company, right? So using the Menlo's matrix, it can be established that before DCS was listed or quoted on national stock market, it had the following stakeholders group. Before flotations, shareholder, employees, lenders. After flotation as well, same thing. But shareholders, there were private investors comprising the founders' majority holding and possibly those of family and close business associates. And employees, mainly non-unionized, loyal to smaller family-oriented business. Insignificant borrowing before flotation, presumably overdraft and short-term payables. Whereas after flotation, a wider group of public individual investors and a 30% holding by institutional investors, more skilled staff but operating core staff mostly unionized, lenders are more powerful and interested, high gearing and covenants in place. The following table shows the Mendelow's matrix positioning and strategies for this group before and after flotation, right? So alternatively, a grid could be presented where arrows could be used to indicate where stakeholders had moved within and between the quadrants after being publicly listed. So stakeholders groups before flotation, right? Grid position and strategy. Grid position and strategy after flotation. So shareholders had high power, high interest. Employees had low power, high interest. Keep informed. Active involved, right? Low power, low interest, right? Lenders minimal. Whereas after, so the shareholders have low power, high interest. Keep informed, particularly institutional shareholders. Employees high power, high interest. Keep satisfied or involve more actively. High power, high interest. So the strategies DCS company management would adopt pre and post flotation would differ as determined by the changed position of the Menlo's matrix. The main change in the strategy would be as follows in relation to above stakeholders. Shareholders clearly before the flotation, private shareholders being the owner and his family or close members would have far more interest and power than the majority of the shareholders after the flotation, so the need to actively involve is less necessary, but evidence from the case suggests that there is lack of engagement with institutional shareholders, which could be problematic as this group has far more power than other shareholders. So DCS should develop reporting and communication channel with this important group. In case of employees before they were ununionized, culture of TCS was not to involve, engage, or inform employees and expect them to follow instruction. After flotation, 60% of the data communication workforce are now unionized, and additional employment legislation such as minimum wage, mandatory company pensions are being introduced, which will force TCS to not only keep employees and their representation informed and fairly well satisfied, but also to more actively involve them, in particular regarding pension arrangement. So lenders before flotation was predominantly funded by shareholders' funds and other few borrowings. show this stakeholders had little power and possibly little interest in DCS, particularly if the loan capital represented an insignificant proportion of the lender's total portfolio. After the flotation, DCS has increasingly more highly geared in order to expand into new markets, and therefore the risk faced by the lenders is greater, and this increases the lender's ability to increases the lender's level of interest in DCS and its ability to sustain this level of borrowing and to repay the original capital, as lenders have placed legally binding covenants on the company preventing it from exceeding its current gearing levels. It has more power over DCS. So, meaning that DCS will have to keep lenders well informed and keep them satisfied, right? So, criticize CEO and HR on ethical and professional behavior relating to design, conduct, and reporting of staff satisfactory survey, right? There are issues with that as well. In theory, such surveys are beneficial to organization and to staff if conducted properly, as they help management gain a better understanding of how staff are thinking, what their attitudes and opinions are, and can act as a sounding board from which management can act and make the necessary changes which can improve the culture and productivity of staff. Lack of integrity. Unfortunately, it appears that staff have been misled in that there were assurances given that survey responses would be anonymous, but personal information required gives the impression to staff that management can identify the respondents of the survey, right? Lack of objectivity. From discussion with staff representative, it is possible that key areas known to be of concern to staff obtained from informal grapevine may have been omitted from the survey, and the survey could have dissuaded people from giving negative feedback, particularly about confidence in management. From a statistical perspective, the results were presented in quite a subjective way by using graph styles, which may have misrepresented the true findings, focusing on the aspects which were positive, right? So, professional competence and due care. The design of the survey in which results were presented could have been viewed as being somewhat unprofessional design and then presentation as well, right? And may not achieve what it was intended to achieve. This could have avoided if more care had been taken within the design. Confidentiality is also another issue. One of the matters serious concerning to some of the employees were identified and interviewed by senior managers as a result of negative response to the survey. This action represents to have reached fundamental principles of confidentiality, right? Professional behavior. DCS company management should not attempt to identify dissident staff or schedule and conduct interviews with this individual, as it could be described as demonstrating unprofessional behavior. This is particularly worrying with some interviewees perceived that they were being intimidated or even threatened by the comments made at some of these meetings. Another point we should wish to raise is the danger of operating double standards when the survey was supposed to be anonymous, but staff identified for interview were themselves required to keep confidential the fact that they had been identified and interviewed. Right? That's a double standard. So it's breached all of it. So this is how we basically answer this kind of question. So marking scheme is also been given. So yeah, we will look at few more exam specimen as well, which will give us a bit more clarity. Okay. So yeah, this is it for today. Until next time. Bye bye.